in Chinese, in Mandarin Chinese, the stock market is a body of water.
Welcome to Deep Thoughts on the Rocks, a conversation to uncover truth regarding language, philosophy, and theology.
Yeah, that works.
Banter is good.
Banter is good, but it's also, it's different when it's like, when do you come in and stuff like that?
Yeah, when do you decide to hit record to say this is a good time to bring the audience in on our
That's fair.
And
ceaseless discussion?
Yeah. And now is the time.
Yeah, so we're here in beautiful Lincoln, Nebraska at the Shed, a couple blocks from the cathedral. And it's, what time is it, 11:30? Noon?
No.
Is it noon?
It is noon.
12:07.
It's afternoon.
It's noon. But we're not drinking anything on the rocks just yet. We're drinking some tea, black tea with cream.
Yeah. Well,
It's pretty good.
and like, I don't know. This whole week, it's such a weird weekend. So like July 4th weekend is always super weird. Yeah. It was nice. I got to see some friends that I haven't seen in a long time.
Did you stay in town or did you go?
No, I went to their house in Nebraska City and got to see some friends that I haven't seen since before all the quarantine stuff, and got to socially distance with people.
Fun.
It was cool. Played badminton.
Yeah.
It was good. You know what I learned in badminton, which I find, I don't even know how to feel about this rule. You can't score points unless you're the team serving in badminton.
Is that right? I haven't played since I was a child.
So it's so weird. Or at least the rules we were playing with, I don't know. They were, when your team is serving, if you make a point, it's like, think of volleyball rules. If you make a point, then you get a point and you keep serving. But if the other team scores a point while you're serving, nobody scores any points. It just becomes their serve. And now they can start making points if they're getting stuff. It was very weird. I was not used to that.
Wow.
I got used to it pretty quick because it's not that complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But when we first began, people would just like be shouting out like, "Oh, there's a point," or sometimes be like, "Oh, it's our serve now," and I was like, "What is happening? What is the logic?" Because I'm used to thinking of things like badminton and stuff like the way you think of table tennis, or ping pong, where you just one team serves 5 times, the other team serves 5 times, and anyone can score and stuff like that. But that is not how badminton works at all, turns out. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was fun.
So there's a place in Nebraska City that I really want to visit. I've spent a lot of time there and just never had the opportunity to. It's a bench that kind of has a curve to it. Have you heard of this? Mm-hmm. It's an acoustical wonder where you sit on one edge of the bench, and then way over on the other side, someone else sits down, and when you talk in a very quiet, almost whisper volume, it sounds like they're right next to your ear.
Yep.
Wow.
I really want to check this out because I love acoustics.
They have that. They also have one that's just like that on the UNL campus.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do.
Is it exactly the same?
Building. No. So instead of being a bench, it's these 2 concave paraboloid
I've been
things.
there.
And if you stand at one and all the way across the room, if you stand at a certain point in the other, you can whisper back and forth.
That one makes sense. There was a library at my college in Tennessee that had dome shapes in the ceiling that had a light fixture, just kind of the architecture of the ceiling there. And when you stood right under that big parabola that's above your head and you clap your hands or anything like that or try to talk, there is that delay of your voice that hits all of that surface and comes back to your ears, and it's so much surface area that's coming right back at the same time. That's a really strong little repeat delay of your voice or a hand clap or something like that. So it's kind of discombobulating
and a little odd for a library. Often you want sound to not be amplified and replayed.
I think it was in a hallway or something, but
that's fair.
But I stood there for an inordinate amount of time and got some weird looks from people. But you know what? I was a recording major, so
that's fair. Yeah.
I was studying this stuff in an audio fundamentals class at the time, probably.
Yeah. Have you ever done one of those things? Like it's called like a speech jammer, where you wear headphones, but the sound in the headphone, you put it on a delay.
I want to look this up.
Try to talk, and apparently it just destroys you.
Yeah,
and your
I've
ability
seen
to
that.
speak.
You cannot keep up with it.
Yeah, and like some people obviously do better with it than others.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, apparently it just really hurts your ability to continue speaking.
And I'm sure public address systems, people on a stage trying to talk into a mic, have had, for some reason, that range of a delay coming back to them and made it really hard for them to talk to a group of people and with a sound reinforcement system like that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's where it maybe came from.
It famously comes from, there was a radio show.
Okay.
And I don't remember what the radio show was about, but they had this one particular guest that I guess they didn't like or whatever, and they would always like put his microphone on that or his headphones on that short delay. And he would just sound like an idiot because he like couldn't form sentences
Wow.
and stuff like that. That's
Kinda
sort of like
mean.
famously where it comes from. Oh yeah, no, I was. This is not something you should do to a guest, but like they didn't tell him. He like, I don't know how many times he was on the show, but every time he was on the show, they would do this.
They pranked him?
Yeah, basically.
Oh my gosh. We'll have to look this up and try it once we're done recording this
Yeah.
episode.
Oh my gosh,
And I
it'd
think
be
I heard
amazing.
there's an
The
app.
next guest we have, we need to do that to him.
Oh my gosh, that would be
Oh no.
hilarious.
Oh no. But I think there is a phone app out there that does this.
Oh, I'm sure.
So.
It got kind of made famous on the internet for a little bit. It was one of those things all the
Okay.
YouTubers would try,
Okay.
like the Speech Jammer Challenge.
I'm glad at least one of us is in on that stuff because I'm so far behind on. Like I just found out about fidget spinners like not that long ago, and apparently it's long ago.
Approaching a decade old, but yes.
Wow. Yeah. So
What?
Like,
Yeah, fidget spinners have been around, man.
yeah, for like 9 years.
yeah, they weren't around me.
Did you just
until
hear about
recently.
Tide Pods, like eating Tide Pods too?
He did,
What?
actually. We had that conversation, didn't we?
We did? No.
I thought we did. Oh, I had
No.
it with someone else then.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I didn't know people were trying to eat Tide Pods. That's like
Again, 2014, 2015.
It's not that old. I
What?
thought it was like a couple years old.
Maybe it
when
was.
people were doing
My
that.
my ability to tell when something was is borderline problematic. So,
okay. Yeah.
but I do know fidget spinners were like, I had just graduated high school. Like it's been a while, I think, for fidget
Well, I
spinners.
feel like
Yeah.
they blew up not more recently than that, and then like everyone was using them.
That's true. I watched a video one time. I think maybe were they invented in 2009?
I have no idea when they were
I don't
invented.
remember.
I just like the one that my roommate has that of the three what do you call them? The three fingers on it.
Uh-huh.
They have actual skateboard wheel bearings in each one. And that's nice that they reappropriated those for a toy.
Yes.
Well, unless you would qualify a skateboard as a toy too.
I mean, I was going to say, also, they're just ball bearings.
Yeah.
Like, that's not
But
that
they're
strange of a...
But they don't really have a purpose out on the ends. I would get for the center one, they probably use a skater bearing too. But the ones on the
Oh.
ends, you can like hold on to it, and if your hand is big enough, you can swing it around, and if it misses, the center part of your
Yeah, it
index
is
and
weird that
thumb.
they put more ball bearings in the ends.
Yeah, because they don't spin normally.
Yeah. No, I think most fidget spinners, you can swing them from the edge.
So
Really?
I think so.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna stop talking on it then, because I don't know what I'm talking
No,
about.
So
you
I
you are
just,
describing in painstaking detail precisely what the average fidget spinner is to our audience who are all very aware.
Well, I was just learning about when you dive into too much detail. Well, was that on our... That was actually last week.
A Gricean Maxim. That's what I found it's called, a Gricean Maxim.
What is that?
A Gricean Maxim is the unspoken but thoroughly understood rules of communication between humans.
Okay.
One of them is
Thoroughly understood by people
everyone,
that are naturally
every
social.
single person
Okay.
who speaks.
But some
knows
people struggle
all the
with it.
Gricean maxims. Some people struggle with it, and the Gricean maxims are things like, it is everyone who's having a conversation assumes everyone else in the conversation is trying to is like on their side, in the sense of like, if I ask you a question, I assume you are going to give me a relevant answer. So, which tailors how I ask the question. So I won't ask you things like, I could just ask you how to get to the store. You would be following your Gricean maxims if you gave me directions. You would be breaking a Gricean maxim if you said, by plane, boat. What do you mean get to the store? It'd be like, you're idiot. You are not communicating the way humans communicate. You are breaking a Gricean maxim of, it's a better word than helpfulness, but there's like a word for it specifically that they use. Another one is, you're only ever as specific as you need to be, and you're as vague as you can be when you talk. And if you're more vague, then people feel like you're concealing something. And if you're more specific than you need to be, people feel like you're talking down to them.
Okay, so there is a happy medium.
Well, it depends on the maxim. But
Okay.
like one of the maxims is as specific as necessary, as vague as possible.
So I did hear when I presented this stuff as I understood it this week to a friend, and they said they used to be too specific, and now they feel they may be a little too vague. So that's interesting that you...
Yeah, and it, like, I would say the Gricean maxims are also unconsciously followed. Whenever you are consciously trying to follow them, that's where you will probably make mistakes. They're generally unconsciously followed. And then people obviously are going to tend one way or the other. No one's going to be the perfect human that only ever speaks perfectly Gricean or anything like that. One of the others is if you're how to describe it, but it's kind of like if someone asks you, say you're cooking something at a competition and you're asking the judge to what do they think, and the person says, I really, really think the plating, it's visually very appealing. And that's all they say. They have they are, in a sense, they're working within one of the Gricean maxims would be, that they do not like how it tastes.
Yeah.
You know that, even though they never said it, it's because they weren't specific enough. They did not give you the relevant information. When you ask someone, what do you think? There's a certain list in a cooking competition. You expect them to hit all of it. What it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, how it feels like. There's a list of things.
Right.
And they can either be positive or negative about any of them.
Or omit.
Yep. And the assumption, one of the Gricean maxims is, if you omit information that's expected, it's because your honest answer would be harmful.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know I've used that and usually hoped that the person I'm communicating with didn't catch it, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think people are smarter than we give them credit for most times.
Yeah, and especially with these things.
Yeah.
They're unconscious, like they're understood.
Yeah.
Like it is a sociological disorder of some sort, and to some degree a sociological disorder when you don't catch it, which it happens all the time to everyone. Like when I would not be diagnosed with like a sociological disorder or anything like that. Well, I still make social blunders. The vast majority of social blunders are when Gricean maxims are broken. That's the vast majority. And so, yeah. And so there's just different, but everyone does that. Everyone is a little bit, quote unquote, socially disordered, if you want to use that. That's a very sort of philosophical way of describing it. But everyone struggles with these to some degree, because like when you're really tired or grouchy, you tend to break these maxims because you tend to be a little bit more aggressive or a little snappier, or a little bit, one of the Gricean maxims is how you treat... this may not be a Gricean maxim. I won't put that in his mouth. But one of the things that I think of as socially is like the way you treat ideas is the way you treat the person who has the idea. Mm-hmm. So if someone asks you a question and you say, I don't care, what you are communicating is that you don't care about them. Because and this is all related to the Gricean maxim of everyone's on your side in communication. If you ask me something, I'm going to give you my actual opinion. And the assumption is that everyone actually has an opinion on things.
Yeah.
In a sense. So if you ask me something and I say I don't care, it's not because I don't have an opinion. It's because I can't be bothered to answer your question. In a sense, it's like it's concealing the information for some reason.
Yeah,
and
this
that
kind of
could
fits.
be for different reasons.
Okay, this fits in too to when you find music that you like or something, or you find food or a drink that you like, and you have a strong desire to share it with people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you share it, you really want them to like it too. And when they don't, it can be devastating.
Yes.
Because it feels like they don't want you.
Yeah, and it's one of these things like different cultures will handle it differently. So
Really?
like famously, people in the Midwest omit. We are very famously known for omitting harmful opinions.
We're trying to be nice.
I will always try to find something good to compliment. And like the meanest thing I could ever say is, well, it's not my favorite. Which means I don't like it at all. Like, that's what that communicates. But we always veil it in these different ways. Stereotypically, people from New York will just be like, I don't like it. And you move on with your life. Because in New York, the cultural sort of norm is, no, you're just honest. Like, you just are upfront about what you think.
Straightforward.
My Greek professor, who's from New Jersey, just hates this. It's one of the things in living in Nebraska that like fascinates and frustrates him all the time. His favorite example is when he went to a restaurant with a friend and the waiter brought his friend the wrong food. Like his friend had ordered something like beef and he had been served chicken. Like it was wildly the wrong thing. And his friend just like started eating it. Mm-hmm. And he looked at his friend like, what are you doing? That's not what you ordered. And he goes, yeah, I know, but like I like chicken. It's fine. And he was like, no, you ordered a steak. Tell the waiter you want your steak. You don't have to sit here and just take it. And he's like, yeah, I just, I don't want to rub the waiter the wrong way or like cause a and my friend from New Jersey was just like, what is wrong with you people in the Midwest? You ordered a steak, ask for a steak. And he was just like, no, I'll eat it.
That's me. That's
me.
It's me 100%. I hate rocking the cart.
Yeah. And so like the Gricean Maxims can be lived out in different ways. I think the idea of a Gricean Maxim is that it's universal. But I would say with all universals, there are universal tendencies. There are very rarely universal laws of behavior. There are universal tendencies. And then how that gets lived out in different cultures. So like in the Midwest, it is appropriate to conceal negative, harmful opinions. That's like appropriate. If you're straightforward in the Midwest, it's actually more harmful. Whereas in New York, to conceal it is actually more harmful because then it's breaking down trust.
Okay.
The idea is like, you don't trust me enough to tell me what you really think.
And in the South, they use euphemisms too to be polite, but it does
all the time.
It still conveys as much hurt, I think. They'll say things like "bless her little heart," which means like I don't know what.
It's the Midwest equivalent of saying no offense.
Oh yeah.
You only have to say no offense when you know that what you said is offensive.
Yeah.
Which I find hilarious. It's also like when someone starts a sentence with, I'm not racist, but you only start a sentence with, I'm not racist,
because
but if you're about to say something racist.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise, you wouldn't say that. Like, it's one of those things where it's like...
Right. It's like there's a possibility that someone comprehends it as racist and you recognize that.
Yes. Otherwise, you wouldn't... And the fact that you preface it, it means that before you said, it's not like you said it and went, oh no, that came out wrong. It's like, no. I know that what I'm about to say is 100% going to come out wrong. And I'm just going to let everyone know. I'm going to say it anyway. Which, positive or negative, I'm not going to make the judgment call on every, sentence that ends up being in that format. But it's interesting. You are prefacing your sentence with, I am about to offend people. And I'm not going to stop. Take that however you will in the context of whatever, all the other things that's going on in that conversation. So all fun things. Love Gricean Maxims.
Nice. Man, our banter always turns into a subtopic.
That's super true. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just like interesting things.
I know. I'm fine with it. As long as everyone in listener land is fine with it, we're going to keep going.
Should we continue on to my topic, which is also linguistic?
Well, we should.
Yeah.
We should get there.
Yeah.
All right. We're only 20 minutes in. It's cool. I want to talk today about conceptual metaphors. I'm sure you're aware of what a metaphor is.
Yes.
If you had to define a metaphor, you would say it is what?
Not a simile.
Go
Not
on.
a simile.
A metaphor is when you say something that should be obviously taken as, oh my gosh, I'm bad at definitions at the moment. Simile is when you say this is like that. But a metaphor is you say this is that when everyone knows it's not actually, but it's a commentary on.
The like or similarity is implied, but you just say this is what that is. Like,
Yeah, it's an identification with. So it's like stronger than a simile.
Okay, it's stronger, yeah.
Stronger, because a simile just says these two things share some commonalities. A metaphor says this is this. They are identical. I am conceiving of this, of object A, as though it really were object B, not just as though it had some similarities with object B.
So Joey's guitar is a tree. And what I mean by that is that you can see the wood grain in it because it hasn't been painted.
That's a possibility if you think of
I feel like
I would say, yeah, you could say
quite
something
a
like
metaphor, right? Because that's like you're pointing out the actual physical material it's made up of, and I feel like a metaphor is more like you're using it to convey some type of deeper understanding.
When A is not B, but I'm claiming that A is B. So something like
I'll leave the examples up to you guys because I'm really bad at that.
That's okay. I have my favorite, some of my favorites.
Great.
So
you
now,
actually did some research and some
a little bit because there's a ton. So English has, well, I'll just keep describing what they are. So that's a metaphor. Metaphors tend to be one-off. You say something like, her hair. Oh, well, just go to the Song of Songs in the Bible. Her neck was an ivory tower. Her hair was, her hair was running gazelles or something like that. They tend to be one-off things. A conceptual metaphor is a sort of, it's a metaphor of this concept is this concept. So not an object to an object, but a concept to another concept. And it tends to breed a set of idioms that are all interrelated because they share the same conceptual metaphor. When I start giving examples, it'll make more sense. One of the most common ones in English is, say, what's a good one? Ideas are food is a conceptual metaphor in English. And this is manifest in phrases like you can have a half-baked idea. You can give someone food for thought. You can chew on something, on an idea. You can be brewing an idea. You can drink the Kool-Aid. You can sugarcoat something that you're communicating.
Oh my goodness.
You can spoon feed ideas to people. The underlying conceptual metaphor is that ideas are food. And it breeds all of this family of actual manifest metaphors.
That's really interesting.
That was a lot all at once.
Yeah, and of course, ideas are not food. If someone came up to you and said, "Are ideas food?" What would you say?
What would Jesus say?
What would Jesus say? What would you say if I asked you, Joey, "Are ideas food?"
No,
they're not. Why do we talk about them as though they are, if they aren't?
It's helpful.
How?
Well, I think
defend your opinion.
I think it's interesting how similar the concept is of you've got this consciousness that understands information, right?
Sure.
And there's information that's outside of what you understand, but you can attain it, you can understand it, you can eat it, and then it's in you. It's part of your body of information, your consciousness, Sure, but why use eating? Why not absorbing? Why not soak it in the way we soak in light? Because apparently light is a liquid. Is one of our other English conceptual metaphors. You can soak up the sun. Because
humans think about eating more than they think about absorbing light.
Because that one resonated more. I don't know.
Well, and the reason it resonates more in some ways is because your whole language assumes it. You can't soak up. Well, can you soak up an idea? Can you absorb an idea? I think so.
Yeah.
We talk about it. Yeah, I would say we have multiple.
I'm gonna sleep.
Conceptual metaphors.
I'm gonna sleep on my math book tonight for osmosis.
Yeah, we can do things like that. And you can have multiple metaphors. But we have our set ones. Or here's another good one. The stock market. What do you think? Well, me preface that later. I'll get to that later. I'll give you a few more examples. That way you can build up sort of your vocabulary of these.
Thank you.
One of them is a problem is a body of water. You can dive in to a problem. It can be a murky situation. You can fish for an answer.
Oh my goodness.
And so a problem is at times conceived as a body of water. This mixes, I think treading water works with this. But treading water is more like emotional stability is contact with the ground. You can be head over heels. You can have the rug pulled out from under you. You can be up in the air. You can tread water, or you can be standing on firm ground.
Well grounded.
You can be well grounded. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, because emotional stability is contact with the ground.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's all kinds of fun little things. Another good one, harm is lacking a needed possession. So you can lose your job. You can pay for something, like you'll pay for that. You can buy time, things like that. They can also go into the idea of like benefits and whatever the opposite of a benefit is that I can't think of right now, are monetary exchanges. You can buy time, you can pay for something, stuff like that. Darkness is a solid. Darkness can press in on you. It can be impenetrable. The darkness can close in. A related one is that negative emotions are some negative emotions are solid, so you can cut the tension with a knife. Things like that. Dangerous beliefs are contagious diseases. So you can infect someone with your ideas. You can catch an idea. You can spread ideas.
Yeah, that one's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
These are so cool.
Because, I
Because
feel
I
like
know all of them.
dangerous ideas do kind of like spread almost like a virus. Like people just kind of latch onto it and accept it. And and then it's hard to get rid of it.
Sure, yeah. Thinking about something or understanding something is physical contact. You can grasp an idea. You can latch on to something.
Yeah.
Another good one. Even though, again, you can't actually do these things. And these are one of the reasons this is a really, really new sort of area of study. Because these aren't really idioms. They're more than that. They underlie, because there's an underlying whole family of these conceptual metaphors, and they tend to be the kinds of things that you don't even think of as a metaphor.
Yeah, wow. And it seems like these conceptual metaphors are like the roots or the umbrella of a whole, as you've been describing them.
Yeah, of
like
whole sets of ways of thinking about things.
Yeah.
The body is a container is a really good one that's used in lots of languages. You can be bursting with joy. You can bottle up your feelings. Cartoons use this a lot with anger. An angry person is a container filled with pressure. Mm-hmm. And so you like see steam come out of their out of their ears and stuff like that.
Red boiling up their face.
Yep. Yeah. You can well up with emotion, different things like that.
Although, okay, to be fair about the pressure thing, when you're angry, your blood pressure is higher.
That's fair. And like obviously some of these are, you can really quickly, it's sort of like transparent where this comes from.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So like the idea of anger being pressure. You're like, it doesn't surprise me that that's a conceptual metaphor that's found all over the world. Like these aren't just found in English. Every language has them. I'm reading from a list that is only in English. So different languages can have different conceptual metaphors. And we'll get to that. I do have a really fun example. Two fun examples. One is affection is warmth. So you can be a warm person. You can give a warm welcome or the cold shoulder.
Yeah.
Beliefs are beings with life cycles. So a belief can live on or die out. It can be born. It can be planted like a seed. It can be rooted in fact. Things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I really like that one.
That's
Beliefs
cool.
are beings with life cycles. I would extend that to you can have sick ideas. I think would fit in with that conceptual metaphor a little bit.
Yep.
Or you can have a healthy idea, things like that. Beliefs are love objects. And I picked this one because I love the phrase love objects. Do you care to guess what some of those are? Some of the ways in English that we express beliefs are love objects.
You've thrown so much at us. I'm having trouble of thinking of any others.
Sure.
No, I can't.
Any thoughts?
As soon as you tell me, it'll make sense, though.
You can flirt with an idea.
Okay.
You can embrace an idea. You can cherish an idea.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
You can seduce someone with an idea. You can be married to an opinion. You can be divorced from an opinion. Things like that.
Got it.
Competition is one-on-one physical aggression. That's another one of my ones. The most obvious, and this is where like you would never think of this as a metaphor. You can beat someone at chess.
Yeah.
The word beat means to physically strike someone.
Or
Now
like
it's become
bust out the gloves.
Yeah, you can bust out the
That
gloves.
can be like referring to an argument, though, if you're having an argument with someone.
Yep. You can clobber someone at golf. You can kick butt at singing. Like, you can be a sore loser, as though you've been like beaten and bruised. Things like that. Let's see. What's another good one? Maybe I've done all the ones on my list here.
Did you pull this list from like a website or something?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, it
I did
seems
not
like a
come up with
complete
this.
written out list.
Yeah, complete's a strong word. So this list has
Right.
about 200 on it. It is estimated that English has over 1,000.
Okay.
It is estimated that every natural language has over 1,000 conceptual metaphors.
Interesting.
One of my favorites in English, what do you think of the conceptual metaphor of, if I complete the sentence, the stock market is a what? If you had to think, the way we talk about the stock market, think about the phrases we use with the stock market.
I guess like I don't know, stocks are like going up or falling or
Sure, there's good phrases. We'll keep those in mind.
Bull
What
market?
else? Bull market is a thing. Although I think that's going to be a different metaphor than the one I'm thinking of. But I
Okay.
think it's interesting that we do use animals.
Okay.
Can you have an economic
Rat race?
collapse?
collapse,
Rat
breakdown.
race is another good one. And I think that's one of the conceptual metaphors in English is that all competition is racing.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's a race. Everything is a race with a beginning,
To the finish line.
speed, and a finish line, and
Yeah.
passing people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In generally, it's described as the stock market is a building. It can be built up. It can have a firm foundation. It can rise. It can lower. It can collapse. Things like that.
Oh, collapse. Yeah, okay.
Now, in Mandarin Chinese, the stock market is a body of water.
Cool.
They don't talk about it collapsing. They talk about it being stormy. They talk about it draining. They talk about the sea levels rising and lowering.
Oh, my gosh.
And things like that.
That's awesome.
And so this is one way where the way they talk about the stock market, the way they talk about 2008's economic collapse, I'm just using the word collapse because there really is not a better way to describe it in English than this conceptual metaphor. They talk about it very differently. And what it means is when we talk about how to improve the stock market, we always relate it to like construction terms, firm foundations, building it up slow. Like we always talk about it that way.
Right.
And in a sense, it feels very under our control because humans build buildings.
Yeah.
In Mandarin Chinese, it's my understanding, having no actual Mandarin Chinese in my linguistic vocabulary, that their conception of the stock market is much less under control. Because the way they conceive of it is as an ocean.
And we don't
It
control the
moves
ocean.
on its own. It's a force of nature in a sense. And so it can change the way that they conceive of their ability to interact with it. Another good conceptual metaphor is love is insanity.
I'm crazy about you.
Yep, I'm crazy about you. I don't have the list in front of me, so it's hard to think of these. I found it so smart when I had written them down in front of me. I'm crazy for you. I've fallen in love. I'm mad about you. Things like that. I don't know what that was, but it sounded like space, and I love it. But imagine, how does that change the way that we think about love? Versus, imagine if your conceptual metaphor in your language for love was that love is a garden where you plant things and you tend things and you nourish things and you pluck fruit and things like that. It could change the way you think about love.
So who thinks of it like that?
I don't know. I'm just imagine a world where your conceptual metaphor is love is planting seeds, love is tending things, love is bearing fruit. And I think we have a little bit of this in English already.
Tender love, or I don't know.
Yeah, tender loving care.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You can cultivate a relationship with someone. I think we have this a little bit, but think about the difference. There's a big difference between cultivating a relationship and falling in love. Those are wildly different experiences.
Yes.
Imagine if your language did not have a convenient way to describe one of them. Would that affect the way that you conceive of the abstract concept love?
Right, because maybe we're thinking of different types of love. Maybe there is that love that is kind of like delusional. You're just under some sort of spell almost. You're not really you.
Yeah, love is magic is another one of my favorite ones.
Love is insanity, love is magic. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole list. Love tends to be one of those things that has like a billion metaphors.
It's magic. I just watched Sleepless in Seattle last night.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's
right, because
everybody's
idea of what love is like completely different, honestly. Like
completely different?
Well, maybe not completely, but it has its own differences, I feel like, or everyone has their own idea of what it's like to care about somebody close to them, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I wonder if two people who speak the same language, or to be more broad, two people whose conceptual metaphors for love align, would describe their own subjective experiences of love as being very similar. Whereas if either of them met someone whose conceptual metaphors for love did not include madness at all, period. Like, that's just never the way they talk about it.
Right.
Would they have a very different experience of sort of this objective reality that is love? Is it going to really affect the way, I'll use the word determine, but let's use a soft idea of what determine means. Maybe influence is better. Will it influence your subjective experience of the objective reality in such a way as to really change the way you view objective reality? With the effect that it would be hard to communicate about that thing between two people.
I bet it does influence. I was thinking about if you don't have convenient conceptual metaphors for things, it would make it harder to think of an idea in that way. Mm-hmm. I think the metaphor is a way to facilitate thought.
Yes, I would agree with that. Did you have a thought?
It kind of seems like these conceptual metaphors are like, we use physical things to describe the things in our universe that exist but aren't really physical, like love, like just somebody else's ideas, somebody's concepts, like information, you know, or just the stuff that's outside of all of us, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight. There is a theory. So like I said, this is a really, really, really young area of study. Because ideas are beings with a life cycle. And so areas of study can be young. This is just all I'm thinking of now, ever since I watched listened to a podcast on it.
I was about to say that these concepts are a vehicle for our thought.
Yeah, motion. Like I didn't use any motion ones, but motion is so common.
Train of thought. Yep. I love that one.
But there is a theory that every single conceptual metaphor is somatic, insofar as all of them are ways of discussing and conceiving of abstract objects as ways that our body can interact with it. And that's one of the theories, is that every single conceptual metaphor is fundamentally us embodying an experience,
Right.
making it be through one of the five senses, which I find interesting because I think Aristotle would 100% agree with that. And I think Aquinas would 100% agree with that, because in their philosophical framework, all knowledge comes through the senses.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Even if it's hearing or seeing words on a page, something like that. Whereas, you're not literally listening to happiness, but you have to hear someone describe it or read about it or something like that. But yeah, no, these are my current thing that I'm just thinking about all the time.
Wait,
now.
you said they think all knowledge comes through the senses?
All knowledge.
I thought we used our senses and reason to come to know things.
Reason produces understanding by working on knowledge gained. We can talk about it sometime. There's a difference. So data, knowledge, and understanding are three different levels. Data is the raw sensory perception.
Yeah.
Knowledge is how the brain interprets and stores it. And then understanding is the system that is built up, the framework that's built up, that categorizes and shows relationships between the knowledge.
So how does truth play into this? I'm curious. Data is true.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
If your hand doesn't work properly,
yeah,
it will give you
Sorry,
false
I was thinking
data.
about, yes, it would give your brain false data, but the data itself is true.
Right. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I can see.
The senses will distort it, so your knowledge can be distorted.
Data is the sense perception.
Okay.
The object remains objective.
Okay. The object.
But let's say if you see a mirage, then your data is false.
Right. I
Because
see.
you are not seeing what is actually there.
Yeah. Okay.
So Aquinas defines truth as the conformity of the mind to reality.
Okay.
That's his definition. I think it works really well for most of the time. And so it's the idea that your understanding and your knowledge and your data conform to what's actually in reality. And that's where he says, because all of your knowledge comes through data, you have to trust your senses. Unless you know they're wrong.
And then how do we know the realities that are non-sensory, like math?
He would say they're not realities.
Really?
Math does not exist. It is all concept.
Okay.
Which is why
Interesting.
you can prove things in it, because it doesn't actually exist. It is all just made up. Not made up is probably the wrong word, but it doesn't actually conform. It doesn't actually have true existence, which means it has no imperfections, it has no flaws. It is actually a perfect system.
And so we can't know God?
Because, basically.
Because we're not God.
Yep.
God is that perfect system that we can't really attain through a physical existence, right?
He is 100% non-physical. You also can't know angels. I mean, let's keep that.
Yeah.
And you can't know happiness insofar as we use the word know as mean to comprehend. Aquinas says you can come to know a cause by its effects. And that's why you can know what happiness is, even though you can't perceive happiness. You can have sense perceptions of its effects. You can feel your heartbeat faster. You can feel tingly feelings. You can see yourself doing things for other people. You can will things, and you can perceive the effects of your will. And that's how we know we have a will, is because we can perceive the effects of having a will.
And this it plays right into the inductive methods of the scientific method, right? That we induct knowledge.
Yep, the scientific method works on this premise. If this premise were false, all of science would stop meaning anything, because science is based on the idea that you start with data, which is gathered through empirical means, which means the senses. It just means measurable sense perception is all empirical data is. And then knowledge, it's stored, it's categorized somehow. And then understanding is how we describe the relationships between the points of knowledge. So cause and effect and things like that. But because you will never have all of the data, you can never prove anything in science. You can only strongly support it beyond a doubt. but you can never mathematically prove that something is true with science. You can only show that I've done 1 billion tests and they all point to the same thing. You can disprove something because it only takes one time that something doesn't happen for you to be able to claim it doesn't always happen.
And that is a true statement.
It is a true statement if it aligns with reality.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and that's why controlling variables is so important in science, because if you change 2 variables and your experiment then goes a different direction and then you claim, oh, it's because of this one, that may or may not be true. You have no way of verifying that because you changed 2 variables and you don't know which one or both of them together. You don't know what the combination was that changed the results because you've changed 2 things. It could be A, it could be B, or it could be A and B both being changed. That causes a different reaction. Or it could have been
something else that you didn't know changed.
That's the other caveat. Because your knowledge is never true, that's why you can never prove it. You can only strongly support it. And that's why repeatability is so important. If a study ever happens and it's not repeatable, you throw it out.
Right.
Because if it's not repeatable, it's not scientific. That's anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence has its place, but its place is not empirical science. It is a different thing. It's a different form of knowledge.
And we gain so much knowledge through anecdotes, don't we?
Yeah, actually, there is a theory that everything in your brain is anecdotal. That you actually can only understand things as anecdotes. So,
for example, I enjoy listening to vinyl, and I spent way too much money on the cable that connects my turntable to the phono preamp.
Sure.
The one that I had that came with the turntable worked. This other one was more expensive and claimed to sound better. Now, was I scientific about when I swapped it out to do listening tests, extensive listening tests of this one and that one, A being it, and trying to hear the differences to decide whether it's worth that money before I could decide to return it? No, I didn't do that. I swapped it out and I said, I think this sounds better, but I also spent a lot of money on it and feel good about having something that's more valuable in my system.
Yeah, what's the oh gosh. There's a logical fallacy that is that exact thing.
Yeah.
It's the fallacy of investment.
Yep.
The idea that the more you've given into something, the more likely you are to assume it's successful.
Yeah.
Or the more likely you are to see it to completion, even if it's ultimately futile. The idea of, I've already come this far, I have to press on. No, you don't. You don't have to. Just because you've come this far does not mean you have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
It's the logical fallacy that I think is probably most commonly used. Oh, that's a strong statement. I think it's one of the logical fallacies that is most commonly used by ourselves and by the devils in egging us onto sin. Is you're already this far into it, why not see it to completion?
Right. Yeah, you're right.
And I find it really tragic when it comes to relationships with people.
Yes, I think a lot of relationships continue way past the obvious point where they should be broken off.
Oh, yeah.
And it's this fallacy of investment. Now, that doesn't mean that everything you've done a lot of work towards you shouldn't complete. Just because it's a logical fallacy doesn't mean you're wrong when you use it. It just means you aren't necessarily right, which is one day we'll have an episode on logical fallacies and what they really are. The difference between, one of the most commonly used logical fallacies is the slippery slope. The idea that these problems will lead to all these other problems.
Right.
It's not necessarily true, which is why we call it a logical fallacy. You aren't proving anything. It also doesn't mean you're wrong. It might actually be leading to all of those things, but you can't prove it with mathematical certainty. And when we talk about logic nowadays, we almost always mean predicate logic, and predicate logic is mathematical, which is why you can actually talk about proving something true. Whereas not all forms of logic are necessarily mathematically sound.
There's a really cool book at the Newman Center that I don't know if you've heard of, but it uses that predicate logic, I think. Mm-hmm. And the way that you learn to comprehend it is through diagrams.
Yes.
It's wild.
That's very normal.
Is it? It's new to me, and I thought it was really cool. I haven't read through it yet, but
Conceptual metaphor. All knowledge is visual.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, universal. I don't think there's a I think that's a universal one. We will never prove that it's universal because there will always be the ability for a language to not use that ever. Like, I can conceive of a language that does not ever use visual metaphors for abstract ideas. Like, it's possible. So I can't prove that every human language ever will always do that or always has. But, like, I can't think of... That just seems very human to me. That doesn't seem linguistically bound.
Right, because you could think of just like an informational system that isn't based on that, you know, like...
Sure.
So, or just like a computers that can communicate information, all the information you need visually or whatever, that's not based on metaphors or whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to disprove myself real quick. People born blind do not use visual metaphors. I am told. I've never actually like asked a blind person who was born blind, do you visualize, quote unquote, do you visualize things, or what does that mean to you? But I remember, anecdotally, once reading something that's like, yes, like blind people do not visualize things. That doesn't,
right.
If they're born
From
blind,
what I've seen,
if they're born blind,
that even people that become blind pretty soon, the meaning of sight to them, it just means like almost nothing. Like they can't even, it's not even something they really comprehend of what it's like to see things.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
I was
Not,
thinking
they
of
won't
that, yeah.
they won't perfectly ever like really lose it, but it will weaken. You know, your ability to recall information is going to weaken if you don't have it reinforced. But yeah, fun stuff.
Wow. So that's conceptual metaphors.
Yeah, that's a basic overview of conceptual metaphors and how they relate to thinking. Yeah, I think it leads to a lot of interesting ideas in my head. So one of my hobbies is conlanging, creating languages. Think Tolkien Elvish language, or Game of Thrones Dothraki, stuff like that. These are really interesting. So one of the big things with language is people always talk about how language and culture are so closely interconnected. Often the assumption is that a culture they'll have words for things that are important to them, and they will lack words for things that aren't. So one of the common, misjudgments or like overgeneralizations is the idea that like you always hear about the Eskimo languages have like 40 different words for snow because snow is so important to them. First, it's not true. They have like 5, and so does English. So there's not a huge difference there. Or the idea that if a language has the same word for 2 things. So in Lakota Sioux, the word for horse and the word for dog are basically the exact same word. You can call a horse Trashunka, which means big dog. But that does not mean that they think horses are dogs. Like 100%, they are aware, obviously, that they are very different animals. But their language doesn't reflect that. And so you can overgeneralize it too much. But one of the big ways that people who are making languages and stuff can reflect culture is through conceptual metaphors. Because that really does seem to be something that can be cultural specific and reveal a lot and sort of influence the way people think about things.
Right, and you can kind of, just by breaking down the language, sort of figure out the way a whole group of people thought about something.
Yeah, it's very interesting. One of my favorites, I think in Ancient Greek and Latin are 2 of the languages that I think about most often. And it's interesting to see sort of some of their metaphors, which ones are similar and which ones are different. One of the big ones in Latin is that understanding is sight. And so, in fact, if you want to say that seems good to me, you literally say that is seen as good to me. That is the only non-pedantic way I can think of to even word that sentence.
Here's another one. Allow me to illuminate your mind.
Yep.
Right.
a good one.
You can't see it if it's in the dark, but if I illuminate it for
Sure.
you, then you can see
Oh,
it.
right.
I'm
And
in
then
the dark on this.
Even there's
something
like that cartoon thing, you know, as soon as somebody has an idea, they fill that empty space in their head, a light bulb turns on.
Yep, a light bulb. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, and so it's just interesting. I'm trying to think of one where they have a very different, and I'm struggling. Life is an animal that you drive like cattle in Latin. That is their conceptual metaphor. In English, you lead a good life by a rope. In Latin, you drive it with a whip from behind.
Whoa.
That is a real one. That's a cool one. Also, this word for to drive with a whip becomes their do verb. The verb you use when you aren't being specific, like do the dishes, do your homework, do something, what are you doing? In Latin, it's that same word, agere, or agere. It means to drive cattle or to conduct some group of animals a certain direction, stuff like that. And that becomes their normal verb for just do. So like, what are you doing is quid agis or quid agis, which is also very fun. Yeah, all sorts of good stuff. I think we can wrap up. I think if I keep talking, I'm just going to be rambling.
That's
and
okay,
not being
man.
super productive. But
We came up with that was a lot of metaphors. That was really fun.
yeah, oh my gosh.
So,
And there is a
thank you.
list. If you look up conceptual metaphors list, you can find the exact one I was reading off of. I think it's the first hit on Google or something like that.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thank you, Mike. That was a good one.
Yeah.
You can email us at deepthoughtsontheRocks@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.